Hello and welcome to this Your New Moon video for the Aries new moon of the 18th of April 2015. The moon will be new in the nakshatra of Ashwini. Ashwini being related to the divine physicians, the Ashwinis. And we're going to talk a little bit about healing just to start off. And interestingly enough, as the planets always seem to do so, they conspire in favor of a specific theme. And the theme this week, well, let's talk about the concept of time healing all wounds. I know it sounds a little bit like a sappy cliche, but really on a certain level, it's really true. And let's think of the concept of objectivity, being objective to something, and subjectivity, being subjective to something, right? We can have the knowledge, the wisdom in our mind. We can think something to be a solution. We can perhaps think that we see the way out of a situation. But sometimes we still have to go through the experience of working our way through a particular set of scenarios, events, and the feelings that result in our heart in connection with this. We still have to go through the process. And really, on many levels, we should go through the process because basically, in that manner, knowledge becomes something that's integrated. It becomes wisdom, and it's only with that wisdom and that space inside of our heart that we can really go through the changes that we need to go through and create actual lasting change in our life, rather than just something that's temporary. And obviously, that's the change that we want to be able to create, is the lasting change. We want to be healed and through a specific set of events forever, right? We want to move on. And there is the potential for that, but you've got to go through the process. And that's what this new moon energy is all about. Key in leading up to the particular new moon environment and also after it are several different planetary aspects. We're going to touch on each of those today, starting off the week on the 15th. And you can look at this as a week ahead forecast too. I want to try to keep doing these as much as possible, the week ahead forecast, not just the new moon and full moon. So we'll throw all the aspects in connection with it. Venus opposes Saturn on the 15th of April, which is likely when you're watching this. And then on the 17th, we have Pluto stationing and moving towards retrograde motion. Mars and Jupiter are going to square off and create some tension with each other just ahead of the new moon in Aries and Ashwini. On the other side, we've got a harmonious angle between Mercury and Neptune. On the same day that we have Venus squaring Neptune, we're going to go a little more into depth on that particular aspect later on. Mercury will also form a tense angle with Jupiter, and ending the week off on the 21st, a harmonious angle between Mars and Pluto. Very powerful energy with which to make some very good change occur in your life. But first, you've got to go through the process, and you should never rush the process. These are all astrological alignments that are meant to initiate or spark certain things. Let's talk a little bit about astrological alignments before we go into pointing these out rather. Something to understand about the planets is in Vedic astrology, we look at the planets as having a consciousness. They're here on a certain level too. They're here to serve spirit. They're here to create changes. In Vedic astrology, we call them grahas, because they quite literally grasp onto an individual or possess them and make them kind of act in a certain way or potentially react in a certain way in alignment with those particular planetary alignments, so the actual change can come into being. They're there to foster our evolution. They're there to foster our growth. But first, because we live in a world composed of Maya, and some people would say Maya is illusion, but that's not really quite a fair translation of the word. It's illusion, but it's an illusion that can have an actual effect on you. So you can say, you know, here comes a brick. Oh, that brick is just Maya. It's an illusion. Well, it's going to hit you on the head and it's going to, you know, cause some pain. So, you know, sure, you can call it Maya, but it's something that has an actual impact on you. Right. And so the planets will coordinate with Maya so that we go through this whole experience of self-understanding, of integration, so that we evolve over time. Right. And that's the way that true healing can happen, because this lifetime, just a drop in a bucket. Right. So it's got to make the most of the moment with the lifetime that you have, but it's also important to recognize that there is plenty of time to go through the changes that you have to go through in this particular lifetime. And while we're on that subject, why don't we get into the on the subject of time? What better way to start with than to talk about the Lord of Time himself, and that is Saturn. Now, everybody gives Saturn a very bad reputation. As soon as everybody hears that Saturn is having an effect on their chart somewhere, they go, oh no. And interestingly enough, in Vedic astrology, planets have friends and they have enemies. And Saturn has more enemies than any other planet. But his purpose is to do actual good to our lives. But he has to work so hard in order to overcome all those enemies that he has to become, you know, somewhat harsh in his approach in order to actually create the changes that he needs. Saturn is the Lord of Time. Without time, gee, wouldn't it be really hard to work through all these experiences that we're going through? In addition to that, Saturn serves the purpose of crystallization. Nothing can come into form if Saturn isn't going to help to give it that form. So Saturn is a very important planet, but it creates a lot of very difficult experiences in our life. And we start off on the 15th with an alignment between Saturn and Venus. These two planets will be opposing each other in the sky. And Venus will be in Gemini and the nakshatra, also called lunar mansion, of Rohini, Saturn in Sagittarius and Anuradha. Let's touch on Venus first. An aspect of Venus that most people don't know about is Venus will give us the wisdom with which to make, or rather Jupiter will give the wisdom, but Venus will administer the advice to make good changes. Venus is about values and about ethics. So Venus is associated with right choices in our life on a specific level. In the royal court, Venus is considered the minister. He administers the advice. Venus is also associated with healing, so you can look at it that way too. And Venus is in a section of Gemini that's called Rohini. Rohini is about growth. Being able to grow, being able to use one's creativity, one's creative intelligence with which to create some changes and foster those changes. It's also the cosmic womb through which those changes come into being. Without the dormant stage and without the ability for those changes to be fostered, then the growth never happens. And these are some of the processes that are associated with Rohini. And Saturn is over in Anuradha and Sagittarius. Anuradha, ultimately, its process teaches right relationship. Right relationship with experiences in our life, with people in our lives. In this particular instance, something that we have become so fanatically devoted to. And Venus in Rohini wants to show us that there is a way out of this, because the old is something that we're becoming stuck in. And Venus in Gemini and Rohini at the beginning of the week provides us with inner knowledge with which to create a transformation. But Saturn is going to make us still wish to cling on to that old wisdom, right? And you can get in the blame game and give yourself a hard time about not being able to let go of something, or you can trust that time knows what it's doing, because that's Saturn's purpose too. These planets may be opposing each other, but they're doing it so that you grow and you evolve. So there is a process that they're wanting you to go through. So take a look at both sides. Take a look at what you're clinging on to, why you're clinging on to it, right? But also look at that knowledge and that wisdom in your heart and understand what it is that you can actually do about it. We're going to move on a day or two until the 17th. And what are we going to have happen on the 17th? Well, you're not going to see the little R symbol over by our friend Pluto, but on the 17th of April, Pluto will station and will go retrograde. Now, when a planet retrogrades, we internalize the process of it. If you follow Vedic mythology or know much about it, there's a trinity of deities. There's Brahma, the creator, there's Vishnu, the preserver, and there's Shiva, the destroyer. We have to destroy the old forms so that something new can come into being. In terms of the outer planets, you can look at Uranus as Brahma, you can look at Neptune as Vishnu, and you can look at Pluto as Shiva. So Pluto is there to destroy the old forms, and Pluto is going to station and go retrograde. And that means some changes are going to go on for the next several months internally. These changes might be representative of something that's difficult for you to digest at first or hard for you to face, but you need to trust that loyalty to particular worn out sets of values is not something that's going to serve you. Inside of yourself, the truth of who you are is something that is never going to change, right? But it needs to undergo a not the truth doesn't need to undergo a transformation. I should probably explain that a little bit better. But your ego needs to undergo a transformation, right? So the truth of who you are in essence is never going to change. But your ego, the egotistical side of the mind, and I don't mean the side of the mind that goes, oh, I'm better than you are, right? It's, that's part of it, but that's only a small portion of it. I'm talking about the side that, thinks something, but that something that it thinks actually goes against spirit. That's what I mean when I say ego. And we need to let the ego die a little bit every day so that we can undergo the transformation, so that we can become more whole. Those are the changes that Pluto wants to bring into being. So over the next several months, some inner changes going on, so that when Pluto then stations and goes direct, actual external transformation on the world stage of your life is something that can follow upon the heels of Pluto's retrograde cycle, right? On the 18th, that's the day that we actually have the new moon in Aries and Ashwini. And also on the 18th, we have an aspect between Mars and Jupiter, a tense angle between these two planets. As you can see, they're already applying to this on the 17th. We could move it forward to the 18th, but for our specific purposes, this will suffice. Mars is in Taurus and Bharani, whereas Jupiter is in Ashleisha. Mars, as Mars is always ready to do, he wants to bring about those active changes. Bharani is related to the birth canal and also the Vedic deity Yama. Yama is the god of death. So the purpose of Bharani is to actually usher a new phase of our life into being. As it's symbolized by the birth canal, we sometimes go through labor pains in association with that particular event. Mars is ready for those changes to come into being based upon his position in the sky, right? Jupiter wants to kind of go over that old wisdom because there's still some emotional attachment connected to it. And because of that emotional attachment, Jupiter's saying, well, not yet, not right now. We're not ready for those changes. So it's creating some tension between those two planets. Can manifest in your life in frustration, being angry at a specific set of circumstances, perhaps even being angry at yourself at not being able to let go of something. But just be patient with the process. Not everything needs to happen all in one go, right? New moon let the process will take place in the lunar mansion of Ashwini late in the evening UK time on the 18th. Ashwini, once again, being related to the divine physicians, the Ashwins. Also, Ashwini is, you can look at it as being related to prana. It's the energy of movement. It's very swift, fast-moving energy, and its purpose is always dharma, that which is righteous, that which feels right in our heart. And there's a energy of looking ahead in association with this, still being in the present, still feeling all the feelings that you're feeling, not quite ready for the movement yet, but you can see the sparks of changes coming into being. And that's why Mars is going to have a little bit of that restless energy besides its already usual restless energy that it has, because Mars is a restless planet. It always wants action, but basically the new moon in Ashwini is going to further inflame that, because you can see what could be, but there can be some frustration at yourself. And everything serves a purpose, right? You know, so sure, maybe on one level it's good to be frustrated with yourself, because that's going to make you actually want to take the changes when the time approaches. But by the same token, you have to be patient with yourself, and allow yourself to go through the processes that you need to go through, so that, as I said at the beginning, when you actually make those changes, they'll be long-lasting changes, and they wouldn't have been made on rash decisions. Instead, you would have actually deliberated over it and felt that you gave both sides of the situation a fair opportunity to chime in their word on the situation. As we move on to the 19th, let's move on a day in our cosmic calendar here and bring up our magnifying glass again. An interesting situation begins to happen between Mercury, Venus, and Neptune. Let's touch on Mercury and Neptune first, right? Let's start with Neptune. Neptune has recently, within the last month, moved into a new section of Pisces that's called Purva Bhadrapada. Purva Bhadrapada's purpose is to take the abstract and bring it into concrete form. On one level, Purva Bhadrapada is very inspiring energy. And as Mercury is over in Bharani, which again is related to a process of letting go, shifting, and moving on. But first, somewhat of the pains of contraction, labor pains, so to speak, so that the new birth can happen. These two planets are forming a harmonious angle with each other. Basically, an illusion begins to clear. You begin to see the situation in a much more lucid manner, and you're ready for the transformation to happen. But some of the details still need to come in. And over here, we've got Venus in Rohini. Venus is able to see where things should head now that the transformation is going on. But Neptune is still wanting to bring in a few more of the details so that there is a clear picture. Now, why is this particular aspect so interesting? Let's touch on that. Bharani is actually ruled by Venus. So Venus's process is going to become even more heightened in this particular situation, making it even more interesting. Although Venus and Neptune are forming a tense angle with each other, Mercury is forming a harmonious alignment with Venus that's called a semi-sextile. Those two planets are working in harmony. Mercury represents the power of objective thinking, discrimination. Venus can be based around our values, as we were discussing earlier. So those two planets working in conjunction with each other so that our understanding really becomes firmly set in stone, right? So Venus may be squaring off against Neptune, but Mercury is working in harmony with Neptune, and Mercury is working in harmony with Venus. So Mercury is the intermediary. So an objective process based on the subjective experiences that you're going through really needs to happen so that the shift can take place on the broader scale, and so that you can actually fully benefit and fully prosper from the situation. If we move on to the 21st, the very last day of our astrological week that we're looking at, we've got two particular aspects. One, between Mercury and Jupiter. They're forming a tense alignment with each other that is known as a square, an angle of 90 degrees. You don't have the exact degree set on this because I'd have to really fidget with my clock on that, and we're not going to do that within the scale of this. This is a powerful alignment because Jupiter is in Ashleisha, which is ruled by Mercury. And at this particular time, Mercury has the understanding that it needs to move on. It's the discrimination has set in, the right judgment has been made, but the emotions are still floundering. Jupiter is going to represent an emotional part of this process because Ashleisha, which is where Jupiter is, has the tendency to hypnotize and draw people into a particular set of circumstances. It's all for a reason, and ultimately with hindsight, you'll see the reason and you'll be glad that you let the process run its full course, but the tension is there. On the 21st, the very same day, you've got Mars and Pluto forming a harmonious angle with each other known as a trine. That's very powerful, very explosive energy. Mars is also going to be further bolstered in this particular situation because Mars is in a particular condition that's called Virgotama. I'm not going to show this to you, but there's a certain chart which gives us a little more background on what a planet's doing in terms of the nakshatra that it's occupying, and that is called the Navamsha. And when a planet occupies the same sign in the Navamsha as it does in the regular chart, then that planet takes on a very prominent position. So Mars is ready and dedicated to push those changes through with all possible force behind it, and he's got the backing of Pluto. Ultimately, this is about being true to yourself. Not always necessarily being true to your emotions, because a point's going to be reached in this process where even though the emotions are there and it's difficult to let go, the letting go is going to need to happen. This is going to happen with this Mars-Pluto energy. At least one very big level of the birth process that needs to happen, there's going to be a very big contraction with this. Let's put it that way. And coming out the other side is going to be a new level and a new part of your life, a new chapter, so to speak, because while we're here, we work through layer upon layer of our, I don't want to use the word issues, but of the illusions that we're working through and the things that we need to look at, our karma, so to speak. The healing doesn't always happen all at once. We go through layer upon layer. And a very big piece of that cosmic skin, which you've been wanting to slough off of your back, is going to happen with this Mars-Pluto trine. And even though it may have involved some frustration over the course of the week and a healing process that really kind of took you to some very deep places, ultimately, you're going to be very glad that you went through the process. Now, these particular aspects are going to affect each individual differently, of course, based upon where they are happening in your chart. I can't know that just sitting on this end. I would need to look at your complete birth chart, your rising sign, all the planets in order to have a full understanding of where this is going on for you and what parts of your life it's really affecting. If you're interested in going a little bit deeper with this process, I do offer a vast range of astrological services, which are available through my website. And if you haven't closed down the link, there should be a link on this video that will take you directly to the astrological services page. I offer one-to-one consultations. I also do video reports. In addition to that, I also offer written reports, all available through the astrological services page. There's also a link further down on this YouTube page in case you've closed the link already, and you can get to my astrological services page that way. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube page yet, you might consider doing so that you can receive an update every time I post a new one of these videos, which hopefully will be next week on the 22nd or before the 22nd. So until then, my friends, I do hope that you'll take the very best care of yourself. Bye now.